Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a nuestro programa En Esencia, ahora internacional. Nosotros estamos ahora en nuestros estudios virtuales con Mark Terry. Él es de Canadá y es un profesor de la Universidad de York, además muy preocupado acerca del calentamiento global y involucra mucho a los jóvenes para que todos tomamos conciencia de este problema. Toda la entrevista va a ser en inglés. Well, thank you so much to be connected in our program En Esencia. We are now have an interview with an excellent person. He is Mark Terry. He is a professor in York University, and also he's a producer and filmmaker. Thank you so much, Mark, to be here in Esencia in our virtual set. More than welcome.
Muchas gracias, Katina. Thank you for having me on your show.
That's good that you have a map in your back, and
yes,
we can see what is going on in our planet. Who is Mark Terry, and why is he so passionate about the problem that is the global warming?
Okay, well, thank you. Who is Mark Terry? Well, Mark Terry is currently a professor at York University and also at Wilfrid Laurier University, both in Ontario and Canada. And I've been working with the United Nations on the subject of climate change and global warming going back to 2009. I began to make documentary feature films about climate research in the polar regions, Antarctica and the Arctic. And that was very interesting to the United Nations. So they showed at their climate summits. And then they wanted for me to make more, but it's very difficult to make a feature film. So we came up with the idea of getting young people involved. They were kind of like burst journalists, where they would go out and videotape a very short 3 to 5 minute documentary about climate research, climate impacts, and climate solutions in their home country. We even have a few from Ecuador. And what they would do is send me the films, and in the beginning we would put them together in the form of a documentary feature film. But then the delegates of the United Nations wanted more. So we expanded our platform to include a geographic information system map, which you see behind me here. See, that's a GIS map of the world. And what we would do is take the films and we would plot them on the longitude and latitude coordinates of where the young filmmaker made the movie. And we put them on the map. And that's what you see behind me now.
That's great, Mark. And also we have seen you in some TED Talks talking about that you have been in the North Pole and in the South Pole. You have made films there that we can see how the ice is melting and how is the water is more hot than ever before. So can you explain us how these films were made, first of all, and who helps you to do these films? Because going to the North Pole and to the South Pole is very expensive.
Yes, that's right. Well, luckily, I took a strategy of fundraising that involved pre-selling the film to broadcast around the world. So I went to a film market known as MIPCOM in Cannes, France, you know, where they have the big Cannes Film Festival. Yes. Well, I went there and they had this market. And I was able to meet the broadcasters from all over the world and tell about my project. That way I was able to pre-sell and then use those funds to actually make the movies. So I sold it to Germany, ZDF in Germany, and CBC in Canada, PBS in the United States, and a few others. And with all that kind of revenue that we had from the pre-sales, I was able to make these films.
And what motivates you as a person, as Mark Terry, to do these films? What is your motivation?
Well, I think, you know, the issue of climate change and global warming is probably the most important issue that we have facing the world today. It is a global issue, very much like the pandemic that we're going through with coronavirus. They're both global issues. But this one is more important because the pandemic will eventually go away. But global warming and climate change are having impacts that are permanent. And they might make the very planet we live on impossible to live on. And so that's why this issue is so important. We have to raise awareness, not just of the general public, but of the policymakers, the people around the world who can introduce policy to change our behavior to save the lives of everybody, including ourselves.
So this is a very good motivation, because it involves all human beings, and it's going to be the heritage of our sons or of our grandchild. So this is very important. Based on your experience, what is the films that you have made, how they have impact in the community?
Well, the obvious way in the beginning is when we show them in the cinemas and at film festivals. The general public is very surprised to hear some of the scientific data that we report in these films. They didn't know, for example, that grass was growing in Antarctica, right? They didn't know penguins were now committing suicide.
Wow.
And there was lots of brand new discoveries that we talk about in these films that's very helpful for the average person. The second set of impact is how these films are used by the United Nations. They use them as data delivery systems. And they actually watch the films and take the information that the scientists report, and they use them to craft policy that helps the individual countries as well as the rest of the world. So that's twofold: raising awareness with the general public and helping the policymakers come up with new laws to save our lives.
Also, it's very important what you are doing with the young people. How do you manage the young people to get interested in this issue?
Yeah, well, it's very important that the young people are involved in a project like this, because it is their generation that's going to inherit the damage we did ourselves, right? So they have to know what the problem is and how to solve it. So getting them involved in a project like this really helps achieve that. And the way we reach them is we have a few ways, actually. One of them is a call for entries. It's a competition that we call the Global Youth Video Competition. And what we do is we put out a call through the United Nations Communications Office, allowing them to find out that we have a couple of themes every year. We change the themes each year. And so they're told what kind of climate theme to use for that particular year. And then they go out and make the films. They send us, and the best ones actually win a trip to the United Nations Climate Summit, where they can participate and get a nice little award. That's one way. Another way we do it is we have something at York University called the Planetary Health Film Lab. Now, this is an intensive one-week workshop where we take participants from all over the world to the university, and we teach them how to make these films. And then they bring footage from their respective countries to show the climate impacts on their own countries. And these are the films that they make. And by the end of the workshop, they have a little microfilm festival, we call it, where they showcase their films and premiere them. And then we add them to the Youth Climate Report map that you see behind me. That way, the United Nations, who uses the map, can see their projects and see all the scientific research they put in their films at the United Nations.
Mark, we see a lot of colors on your map. What each color, what it means? We see green, we see some red, and also purple.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can show you lots of colors. If you like, I have, if I can share my screen, I can show you the map a little better. Would you like that?
Perfect. Okay, Mark, so right now you are showing us your map. Here we have a lot of colors.
Okay, well, each color represents the year of production. So whenever the young filmmaker made their film, that year would be represented by a specific color. And so that's kind of the setup that we're doing here. So this is very important for temporal analysis. If somebody wants to see at the United Nations how a certain climate issue has been taking place over the years, they can go to the geographic area and then look at all the different colors to see how the problem has changed over the years.
Okay, and also I see that this map reflects all the films that they have made over the years, but also what has been the impact of this film? What is happening in South America? What is happening in Africa? I see also a lot of colors in United States. What's happening there?
Yeah, well, it's all kinds of different, climate problems. Some of them are droughts, some of them are floods, some of them are melting glaciers, like in Argentina. Other times we have deforestation. We have migrating marine life and birds that change their location. And all these things are very important to analyze because it gives us a global picture of the entire planetary ecosystem. And that way we can relate all these little films together and help kind of understand why these things are happening.
And you tell us something very important, and I think I hope I hear it wrong, but I think not, that penguins they are killing themselves.
Yes. Yes, this was kind of an unusual phenomenon that was first observed about 10 years ago. Dr. David Ainley, a penguin specialist from San Francisco, he has spent 30 years of study in Antarctica, and he noticed that certain penguins would walk away from the rest of the colony and just walk into the inland by themselves, and they would never stop walking until they dropped dead. And this was very unusual behavior because if a penguin walks anywhere, it's by the shoreline because that's where the food is. So this penguin was walking away from the food and away from his family. And he wouldn't stop walking, not even to take a little rest or whatever, until he died. So, it appears to be suicidal behavior. It may not be. We don't really know what's going on inside a penguin's head, but they are exhibiting the behavior traits of what we would consider to be suicidal behavior. And so one of the reasons is it seems to be that whenever we're close to a lack of a food supply, penguins eat a little fish called krill. And when the krill population decreases, that's when this behavior starts. So it almost seems like that they're depressed, that they can't get enough food for themselves or their family. And so some of them are taking to just walking away. So
we are here with Mark Terry this afternoon. We are from Ecuador to Canada, and we are talking about the global warming and how he gets the youth to get involved in this issue. And right now he's going to talk about this important thing that he's doing with the youth people, and also he's going to tell us how he's working with them. Thank you, Mark. Tell us more about your project.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Katrina. It's called the Youth Climate Report, and it's a partner program of the United Nations. The way it works is young people from around the world make short little documentary films about climate research, climate impacts, and climate solutions in their home countries and communities. And I take those films and I share them on a geographic information system map of the world. It's a digital interactive map that the United Nations uses as a data delivery system. This is a picture of me here with some of the students from the Dominican Republic. These are all the very enthusiastic students who wanted to make films to contribute to the project. And this all comes about from a couple of films that I made in the past. You might be familiar with. The first one was called the Antarctica Challenge, a global warning, not warming, but warning, right? And then I followed that up with The Polar Explorer. This was a film that brought me to the Arctic. the other end of the earth. And coming up soon, in a couple of months, we're going to have my third film called The Changing Face of Iceland. And we're going to look at how climate change is changing the way the country looks in Iceland and the way it's changing the people that are there as well. So the Youth Climate Report, as I mentioned, is a curation project. It's a community-based, crowdsourced project that has more than 450 films made by young people around the world. And the goals of the project are to provide a visual data delivery system of new climate research impacts and solutions from around the world to the delegates that attend the COP conferences. That's the United Nations Climate Summits. It's also to provide a voice for youth around the world so they may be heard at these conferences. And finally, the goal of the project is to provide a voice to the global scientific community so their latest research will reach the environmental policymakers of the United Nations. Okay, so those are the main goals of the project. And this is what the project looks like. It's a very colorful map. It's interactive, it's digital, it's online, and all the various colors represent the years of production when the films were actually made. And this is very valuable because in addition to the spatial analysis that can be done by seeing where all these films are around the world, you also have a temporal analysis that's available, because you can compare from year to year how things have changed in a single country. So that's how it looks like. I'm very proud to say that we have representation on all 7 continents, including Antarctica. And so every year we give themes to the young people. We tell them, try to find films in your country that relate to these themes. And the themes we use are known as the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations issued back at the Paris Climate Summit in 2015. So usually the themes revolve around these 17 goals. So last year, for example, we had 3 general categories: land, biodiversity, and climate. And more closely related to the SDG goals, we have balancing the use of land for people and ecosystems. And then under biodiversity, we had nature-based solutions for food and human health. And then under climate, we had cities and local action to combat climate change. So these were the themes that the young people worked with last year to make the films that they contributed. And this is what happens. After everybody submits their film, we pick some winners and we bring them to the climate change conference that takes place every year. This particular picture shows the winners from last year, the conference that took place in Madrid, Spain. And you see the winners there are the ones holding the little blue plaques. And the rest of the people on stage are the organizers of the event. And I think I'm there second on the right. So you can see me there. Yeah. Now, one of the ways we get these films is through something called the Planetary Health Lab. Now, here is a picture of the first film lab that we did just this past February. And you'll see all these students that are sitting at the table working on their films. They're all young people from 7 different countries, 2 of them from Ecuador, actually. And they're all working on their films at the same time. So it's a very healthy, collegial sense of collaboration where everybody helps each other out. And together, they make films that represent the climate research in their respective countries. Now, something we're going to do a little differently going forward is we're going to involve more indigenous communities as well as the general community of youth from around the world. And we did this already last month with the indigenous people from Canada. We had their young people make films. This is a picture of one of them working away on their film. And then following that, we're going to have the global circumpolar community of indigenous people make a film as well. And that's the next film lab that we're working on. And so in case anybody wants to contact me to get involved with these programs or to make a film for the Youth Climate Report, you can write me at the Daudelet Institute for Global Health Research. And there's the website, and my email address is just below it. And if you want to write me specifically about the Youth Climate Report, and the website is here, youthclimatereport.org, and my email address is ycrtv1@gmail.com. All right, so that's the little presentation I had for you.
Marvelous, Mark. This helps a lot to to everybody in the world, because the global warming is an issue that is on and has been always on. We have to be aware of that, please. And also, this is important because a lot of people is writing us now, and they are asking us, what are the ages of the young people that can be in this project?
Yes, it's between the ages of 18 and 30. So it's a very wide range of young people.
So I cannot go.
Yes, that's right. I'm afraid not. But maybe you know some young people who can.
Great. So what you do, in order to explain again to the young people that are listening to and watching our program In Esencia, you have to contact Mark Terry. We also will give you all the information of him, and you can make a film about our country, what's happening in our country, what we can do. And also this is important because he's involving also the indigenous people. So we have here a lot of people that can contribute in your map, for sure, Mark.
Thank you. And it's very important to hear the voice of indigenous people, because we don't often hear their stories. And it's very important we find out what's happening within their communities as well.
And also because they are more attached to the earth. They have their ancestors, and they have something that is called Mother Earth in their minds and in their soul. So I think they are more attached to the earth.
Yes, I agree.
Well, Mark, and now, what is your next project? Because you are always moving. So what is your next project from now on?
Well, it's difficult to make new projects now the way I used to because of the pandemic. So everything is done online. I'm just finishing up a new feature film called The Changing Face of Iceland that we talked about. That'll come out in a couple of months. And after that, I'm going to focus on the indigenous youth of the circumpolar Arctic. So we're going to try to get all the Inuit and the Sami and all the people that live up in the Arctic to hear their stories. And we're going to do a film lab with them, training them and teaching them to make these films.
Great, Mark. Well, here in Esencia, we always ask our guests to give us 5 tips to live better. But right now that we are with an specialist in the global warming, we are going to ask you what we can do. 5 tips to avoid the global warming.
All right. One of the things is, I would say, become familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. Find out what they are and follow them. That's very important. That's number 1. Number 2, be more careful about your use of fossil fuels. Try to avoid gasoline and try to find renewable alternatives, sustainable alternatives, like electricity, hydroelectricity, and wind power and solar power. Okay, if you can do that, that's great. Try to avoid using plastic, right? Plastics and other substances like them have trouble breaking down over time, and they contribute very adversely to life on the planet because they do not break down. So try to avoid using plastic. And think about your fellow man, your neighbor, your friends. Help them out. That's very important too, because if you do everything just for yourself, when you could, share a car ride, you know, instead of 4 cars on the road, just have 1, right? And help out each other. Maybe some elderly people have trouble getting around, or recycling. And if you can help them out, all that contributes to stopping climate change as well. And finally, air pollution. Be very careful not to contribute to putting things into the atmosphere that may be greenhouse gases like methane and carbon. Because when you do that, you contribute to the greenhouse effect and global warming across the world. And finally, I would say, if you cut down a tree, plant a new one. You got to keep the forests and make them sustainable and recyclable too. Okay, I think I gave you 6.
But that's great. Also, always another tip is good for everybody to get a word a bit about this problem. Remember that the global warming is not an old issue. It's always on, and is the future of our kids or of our grandsons, also to everyone. So be careful when you use plastics. Be careful to don't use so much gasoline, and if you use it, well, you can give a ride to other person. So that's the most important thing that we can hear about Mark Terry. And Mark, before you go, have you been in Ecuador?
Yes, I've been to Ecuador several times. I've climbed Mount Cotopaxi, and I've been to the Galapagos, and throughout Quito and Guayaquil and the Esmeraldas. I've seen a lot of Ecuador. My son lives there with his family, so I get to visit whenever I can. I think it's one of the more beautiful countries in the world.
Thank you so much. Well, sometime when you are here in Ecuador, we can do this interview with you in our studios. Thank you so much for your time, Mark. Right now, please, if you can give us a last tip or a last message for everyone that is watching us in Esencia right now.
Okay, the last thing I'd like to say is for everybody out there to make a contribution to helping solve the climate change crisis throughout the world, make a film. I know that seems perhaps hard to do, but it isn't. You can even use your little cell phones, right? Make a film, interview the scientists, put that together, and send it to me, and I'll share it with the United Nations. That way you make a direct contribution to solving the climate change crisis that we're experiencing today.
Thank you so much, Mark, to be here in our studios in Esencia, in our virtual studios, first of all. And thank you so much. Well, in Esencia, we'll send you this video so you can show it to the United Nations. I think we can contribute a lot if we are aware about this global warming issue. Please be aware. Thank you so much, Mark, again.
And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
This was all in Esencia Internacional. We are more than glad to have these scientists here in our studios. And also tomorrow we are going to talk more about new projects that Ecuador is having in international business. Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias a todos los que nos vieron y nos escucharon el día de hoy en Esencia. Gracias por estar aquí. Sí, esta fue una entrevista en inglés más o menos, pero tratamos de hacerlo de lo mejor. Espero que haya contribuido en su vida y por supuesto a mejorar el medio ambiente. Que tengan una linda tarde.